History has retained very few figures of Jewish women resistors during the Second World War. In 2007, historian Judy Batalion, born into a family of Holocaust survivors, set out to find examples of strong women during the war who organized armed resistance to the Nazi enemy in the ghettos and in the camps. She wrote an impressive book, The Light of Days, which is now published in France under the title Les Résistantes, l'histoire inédite des femmes juives dans les ghettos. Hello, Judy Batalion. Welcome to Academ. The Light of Days is now a bestseller and won a National Jewish Book Award. You have done an unprecedented research work through several countries to bring out the fate of these heroines. So what motivated you to start this monumental investigation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this project happened by accident. This, or as some say, this was beschert. It was meant to be. This project began for me 15 years ago. I was living in London at the time, and it was a time in my life where I was thinking a lot about my Jewish identity. I am, as you said, the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors from Poland. And I was thinking about what I call the emotional legacy of the Holocaust, the way trauma trickles through generations. I'm a very anxious person, and at that time in my life, I started to wonder how much of that had to do with my family background. How much had my Holocaust heritage shaped how I perceived, how I reacted to everyday threats? And I decided to write about this. I wanted to write about strong Jewish women who had confronted danger. And the first one to come to my mind was someone I had studied when I was, 11 years old. Her name was Senesh. Mm-hmm. She was a young Hungarian Jew who had made Aliyah, moved to what was then Palestine in the 1930s. She was a poet. She was a lyricist. But during World War II, Senesh decided to fight back. She joined the Allied forces. She became a paratrooper and volunteered to return to Nazi-occupied Europe. This led me to the British Library, where I was looking for a more nuanced biography of Senesh. I typed her name into the catalog. There were not very many books about her. I ordered whatever they had. And here's where the beschert portion happens. One of the books that I pick up is a bit unusual. It's an old, dusty book with a blue fabric cover and gold embossed writing, and it's also in Yiddish. It's called Frauen in die Ghettos, Women in the Ghettos. More unusual than the book is the fact that I speak Yiddish. So I start flipping through this book looking for Senesh, and I can't find her. She's only in the last 10 pages. In front of her are 185 pages of stories by and about other young Jewish women who fought the Nazis, and primarily from the ghettos in Poland.
And how did you approach this colossal task and exploit information you were gathering?
So this text was just the beginning. And this text listed, I ended up translating this book. This book had stories, probably about 50 women who fought in various ways in the Polish ghettos and forests. And I then went out, as you said, in Poland, in Israel, across North America, looking at every Holocaust archive, museum, library that I could find, and looking up these women's names, finding documents, finding testimonies, finding diaries, ephemera, letters, video, photographs. And then each testimony listed the name of other women who they were working with in the underground. So then I would look up those women. And in the end, I found thousands of young Jewish women and teenage girls who were involved in resisting the Nazis in Poland.
And your book highlights the incredible courage of these Jewish women, young women. You tell the story about 20 of them. Which of them made the biggest impression on you?
Oh, you can't have a favorite child. They're all, I was very taken and very moved by by all their stories. But, I can tell you one or two of them if you want. So for instance, one woman named Frumka Plotnicka, she was a leader in the Jewish youth before the war. And when war began, she was part of the youth movement culture. And she was about 24 years old, 25, and she fled east. And the movement told everyone to flee east, which is how my grandparents survived as well. But she was in safe territory at the time, but she couldn't take it. She couldn't take having fled. And she was the first person in the whole youth movement to sneak herself back into Nazi-occupied Poland. She went to Warsaw and became a leader in the Warsaw Ghetto. She ran seminars, soup kitchens for hundreds of Jews, lectures, performances, schools. She negotiated with Jewish, German, Polish councils. She extricated young Jews from forced labor. She was known in the ghetto as Die Mame, the mother in Yiddish. She then realized there was a whole country out there. She put on a kerchief and snuck out of the Warsaw Ghetto, and through 1940-41 was traveling through occupied Poland, giving lectures, giving seminars, keeping Jewish communities intact, morally, spiritually. Then she was one of the first people, when the underground became more of a militia, to smuggle weapons into the Warsaw Ghetto. She put 2 guns in a sack of potatoes. She then ran the underground in the town of Bydzin in southwest Poland, where she ran a revolt and was actually killed while shooting at Nazis from a bunker in the Kamionka ghetto during the liquidation of the ghetto. She was 29 years old. And even right then, after the war, the sort of makeshift Polish government at the time awarded her a medal for her military efforts in helping to protect the country against Nazis. And I had never heard of Frumka Plotnicka.
And in the ghettos and in the camps, Jewish women faced concrete type of gender-based violence, including sexual violence. You report on violence that is not often mentioned in history books, right?
I stay close to these women's stories, and many of them were brutally tortured physically and sexually as well.
And in your book, you tell us about when you were living in London, that you felt that your Jewish identity was a problem. What did this work bring to you on a personal level, and as a Jew and as a descendant of a Holocaust survivor?
Yeah, my Jewish identity was very complicated when I was living in London, which is why I was thinking about it in the first place. I was very known as being Jewish. I think that this book, I went into it, as I say, thinking a lot about the trauma, how trauma passes through generations. And yes, it does. I certainly think it does. But working on this also made me realize that not only does pathology pass through generations, but so does strength. So does courage and daring and passion and compassion. And as a third generation Holocaust survivor, I'm now trying to hold both of those things, the trauma, but also the strength, and to sort of decrease the shame and feel pride as well.
Well, thank you very much, Judy Batalion. And by the way, the French version of your book is prefaced by Annette Vievorka, the French historian. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.